Thanks so much for accepting the invitation. Really appreciate it. I looked at your LinkedIn profile and I looked at the hackers founders, and I found it very interesting idea. It seems you have everyone in the tech industry in Silicon Valley, and you gather them all in one platform. Is that correct?
It's not quite. We have been doing events for about the last 12 years. And we've been running networking events in Silicon Valley and around the globe. And through those events, we tend to actually get connected to almost anyone in the tech industry. And so when you run a meetup in a pub, in a cafe, have chai, have beer with, other tech entrepreneurs, after 10 years, you get to know a ton of people.
Sure.
And so it's not really a software platform. We're really just kind of a community of entrepreneur communities. But so yes and
No.
but yeah.
I see your point.
We're a strange organization, a unique organization.
Because in your profile you mentioned something as well about another fund, or you seems like you do have a full-time job, right?
Yeah, so we ended up 8 years ago, we started seeing this global explosion of entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And we decided to start a business. And so the last 8 years, we've had a business of helping companies land in Silicon Valley from overseas to be able to raise capital. So we help them with restructuring. We help them with
awesome.
Soft landing business, capital raising, the whole 9 yards. That was our first 3 funds. We started a program for companies scaling across Latin America. That was our 4th fund. And our 5th fund, we're actually going to take to IPO in London with the goal of being able to fund companies where they're at globally instead of actually forcing them to move to Silicon Valley or helping them move to Silicon Valley. We're going to actually invest in the companies where they're at, and being a publicly traded fund will unlock that ability.
Cool. And then when I looked at the map, you had a map on the website where you put a red dots for the countries where you managed to bring entrepreneurs from, right? And I was curious because I've never found anything in the entire North Africa region, like almost zero. And then, is there a reason for that?
Weirdly enough, we have been, in terms of our growth, it's been really organic. Like, it's only been in the last year that we have like a full-time community person to actually help establish those communities and help entrepreneur kind of organizers organize kind of local events.
Okay.
And so we have typically been where people come from. And they come to one of our events in Silicon Valley. They say, hey, I like this. Can I run one of the similar event back in my country? And that's how we've actually spread virally. There isn't a ton of cross-pollination between like North Africa, MENA in Silicon Valley, or even Africa in Silicon Valley. And so it's only been recently that, for instance, we've started kind of a chapter in Lagos. We started something in South Africa.
Interesting.
I've been making a number of trips back and forth to Beirut, Dubai, KSA. I haven't been to Egypt yet. That's definitely on my bucket list. But we're very interested in actually expanding and trying to connect the entrepreneur ecosystems in North Africa, and how can we help in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me tell you something that I should have started with it. I'm sorry for not. The thing is, I used to write articles about successful entrepreneurs, and I made in a year and a half almost 80 entrepreneurs from all over the North Africa region. And I was meeting the entrepreneur, I was doing the interview, and I was writing the article, publishing the article in the International Entrepreneurship magazine, and then send the article back to the entrepreneur so that they use it as a personal branding and publicity for the company. Yeah. And now, that was back in 2017, I would say. Now, I'm moving from writing an article. People love to see conversation back and forth. And with the coronavirus and the distance between me and you in the US, so probably Zoom is the best tool to use ever, right? And and that's why we're having this discussion, because first, I would love to introduce you to the audience here in the North Africa region, those who will see this. The second thing is, wherever opportunity you can bring, or whoever is interested in joining you, definitely this is going to be good opportunity. When you're saying creating chapters, what kind of business model will be? Is it a franchise type of model, or it's just I'm starting a new complete LLC? Like what is it? Like, can you just share more information if someone is interested?
Yeah. So when someone wants to start a Hackers and Founders chapter, in the tech community, in the open source software community, and I don't know if you're familiar with this at all, but in technology communities, there's a culture of nerds getting together to talk about a specific technology, like a Linux user group or like a Python programming language user group. And these nerds will get together, they'll do a tech talk sometimes, but it's basically a way for them to actually get together and kind of network, but just kind of talk and share stories and get to know each other. And so we were very much started in that kind of capacity. Instead of like a Linux user group or a Python user group, it was a Hackers and Founders user group.
Nice.
And so if someone wanted to start kind of an event, we took kind of an open source approach. We have really 4 rules if someone actually wants to start a chapter, which is one, I'll tell you the crass way because that's how it started, and then I'll tell you the professional way.
Okay.
Is number 1, don't be an asshole. Number 2, do the right thing for startups and entrepreneurs in your community. Number 3, please don't fuck up the brand. And number 4, like, be in touch with us and tell us about problems that people actually have in your community. The professional way, now that we're taking a publicly traded fund, is don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
Do the right thing for entrepreneurs in your community.
It's
Don't
very
mess
much
up
the
the
same.
brand. And weirdly enough, I just came up with those off the cuff when someone asked me at one of our meetups if they could run the similar meetup. And those have actually been pretty good guiding rules. Now we have a little bit more formal process because, you know, we need to be sure that people are doing the right thing for the community, that they're not screwing up the brand.
Sure.
But it's still a very light touch. And our events have always been free. And so there is no business model around these nonprofit events. It's a person who wants to kind of build a community and build a network of other entrepreneurs and be connected to other entrepreneur networks around the globe in Silicon Valley. And we try to actually support those community organizers. We try to get them together with kind of regional, you know, video Zoom kind of events on a regular basis so the organizers can get to know each other. And eventually, our goal is for us to be able to invest in the startups that actually come out of this community.
Wow. Okay.
So, and to be able to help seed them and help support the local ecosystems and local innovation ecosystems.
When you say support,
so,
what do you mean with support? And then are you planning to take them from where they are based all the way to Silicon Valley?
And so traditionally the model has been, you know, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm in, let's say we just had an online event in Quito, Ecuador. Last week. It was an online event. There were 150 tech entrepreneurs in Quito, Ecuador that got together for a Zoom event. And so if I'm in Quito, Ecuador, and I have, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm interested in building a startup, I'm probably primarily interacting with that world through the internet. I'm reading about stories. I'm reading about blogs. I'm crazy because I'm daring to actually build a tech company in Quito, Ecuador. But what are my chances for raising funding and actually growing my company? How do I set up a company? Who do I go for banking services? How do I actually grow? And what ends up happening is when you get entrepreneurs together on a regular basis, they tend to help each other out and they tend to learn from each other. And they tend to learn how business is actually done in that community. Because my guess is that being a tech entrepreneur in Cairo or in Tunisia is going to be a much different experience than being a tech entrepreneur in Palo Alto. And so what we found is that when you have a focal point where people can get together on a regular basis, they learn from each other and help each other out, these essentially end up becoming the future of business networks in that region.
Yeah.
And so what we try to do is help form these communities, help support them. We provide them kind of like, this is what's worked in these areas. You're going to be the expert on startups in Cairo, for instance. Like, I don't know how to build a company in Egypt. My guess is you're going to be a much better resource for something like that. And so in my mind, I would talk to you as an organizer and say, what do you guys need? And what's helpful to you? And, this is what we have. We have a global network. We have this, we have that. If you need connections with this and that and the other thing, we can try to help you. But how can we help nurture and support that ecosystem to actually grow it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense, because me myself, I was running different chapters in Cairo, Egypt for different brands before, and I know it's not an easy work, to be honest, and it requires a lot of time commitment, and it needs a lot of efforts, planning, and from your side. Because now, let's say if you've mentioned something 130 cities all over the world, so I assume you have over 100 chapters. How do you manage your time? How do you handle all this stress and work pressure? Like, what was your passion to start all of this?
I'm diseased. And my motivation has changed. And so, also, this isn't public, but long term, our goal is to actually help our community organizers own a part of Hackers and Founders so that they can actually own part of the funds that we're taking and that we're actually growing. Ultimately, my dream and vision is that Hackers and Founders is owned by our community, is run by our community, and actually is meant to finance the community and to support that community. So we want kind of a whole closed loop ecosystem. I need to get that last piece. And, we're working on the financial engine to make that happen. It started off just as me and a handful of nerds in a bar. and people wanted to do it again, and so I did it again, and people wanted to keep going, and so I kept going. And it just grew and grew and grew and grew. And I was faced with a choice where, like, yes, I'm completely overwhelmed. It's a ton of work. My own startup was actually suffering. So how do we do this? There is no business model for having a meetup in a bar. I didn't want to start charging people for the event, because then I'm taking, $5 or $10 from a poor entrepreneur and giving it to myself. And in my mind, we should get as many resources as we can and then give it to the broke entrepreneurs instead of charging the entrepreneurs to participate. And it just didn't make sense financially. And so what we've evolved into now is we ask people to, run it to start these chapters. We understand that these things will grow, probably out of control. And so how do we help you, build a team? And then how do we give you a way to get out and have somebody else take over, so that it kind of rotates? The advantage of starting these meetup groups and these communities is you get to know everybody and anyone who's interested in building a startup in your community, and you tend to become hyper networked. And that's really helpful in building your next startup. And so it's what I find is that it's a stepping stone to actually kind of grow these communities and to be able to actually grow your next company. And eventually, my dream is that we'll be able to actually, hire people full time to actually support them and to kind of run, kind of startup communities and startup events in all of these areas. But I've had to become a financial engineer to figure out how do we actually add as much value and capital as possible into these grassroots instead of pulling money out. And so we focused on how do we grow the value of the stock of the companies in our communities, and eventually how do we return that value back to these communities and back to the
when
people
you're saying fund, because you mentioned the word fund many times, when you're saying fund, you're referring as if you are an NGO and you're raising funds, or you're referring to the word fund as an investment, like someone is investing and they take an equity back?
So people have asked us if we're a nonprofit. No, we decided we had to be for profit because we're hackers and founders. We're not hackers and nonprofits. We are interested in building companies, but how do you build a company that helps other companies and helping them grow? And so we are on the fund side, we're very commercial. So how we started was people started paying stock into a shared legal holding company, and they would become part owners of that holding company. So they would contribute 5% of their stock into a holdco. They would get 1% of the holdco back. And so we would work with 10 to 20 companies. We would own about half of the holding company. The founders would, we would sell about half of it. The founders would own about 20 to 25% of it, and we would keep about 20 to 30% of it roughly. And that was to be able to grow kind of these local ecosystems and local businesses where startups could actually kind of contribute stock, share upside, share services, share resources. So those were our first funds. Those cannot scale. Like, there's legal limits about how many people you can actually put into one of these vehicles. And so our next step is to essentially take this and grow it exponentially, so that, we have a publicly traded vehicle where startups will get cash in exchange for their stock. Ideally, we will actually give them part of our stock in the fund back so that they can actually have this. That's a little bit too complex. That's going to be a future generation.
I'm familiar with the terms and I understand the model somehow. But right now, let's say a company from the North Africa region, let's say it's coming from Cairo, Egypt, all right? And and they want to go and, I would say, use you as a consultant or use a company to help them to establish and have a presence in Silicon Valley. From your side, how do you do a due diligence for a company in a region maybe you haven't had much of information about the ecosystem of it?
And so, we've been working with ArabNet back and forth for a while. So if there's a company that comes out of the blue, our first step is they would fill out an application. And we're not actively taking on new companies right now, but once we're in full swing, this is how it will work. You would fill out an application, an entrepreneur would fill out an application. That application would get reviewed and scored by other entrepreneurs in our ecosystem. Then if they score well, then they would actually talk to investors, and the investors score the company on how likely they are to hit revenue milestones. You know, if you can hit 100K a year in an emerging market, 250K a year in a Western market in terms of revenue milestones, then we'll consider you for a program. You get scored on that. Third step is then we'll actually talk to the company and we'll say, can we add value? Can we help? If you're a photo sharing app for cat pictures, I don't care. I'm not going to be that helpful to you. But if you're doing B2B, if you are have a SaaS product, if you are doing something in ag tech, finance, fintech, prop tech, that sort of stuff where we have some expertise, then we'll say, yes, we'll be able to be engaged and we'll pull the trigger. Before we do that, then we actually do ask for some due diligence. We do need proof of revenue. We need, are you incorporated? You look at the legal documents. We tend to actually help the companies restructure legally. Because my guess is if you're from Bolivia or if you're from Egypt, what does stock in an Egyptian company mean? I don't know. Because I don't know that. And so we tend to actually help them structure into global jurisdictions that investors tend to be very comfortable with, like Cayman Islands, Channel Islands, Delaware, Singapore, Luxembourg. And then we actually start engaging, and that's the process where we actually start working with a company. Does that answer your question, Mostafa?
Absolutely, yeah. And in details, actually, the only thing that I'm curious to know, what level of companies you're working with? Like, if I'm a solo entrepreneur, I'm running the company for 3 to 5 years, still struggling, making a few $1,000 a year, not a big deal, not yet. But in which stage I should come to you and say, you know what, I'm ready now to go to Silicon Valley?
And so the challenge that we faced of helping companies move to Silicon Valley, and that's why our model is changing a little bit. The challenge that we've had from companies from Latin America, the companies from the MENA region, the companies from Africa actually have, is that Silicon Valley has a racism problem. I think it's an unintentional racism problem. I don't think it's because people are horrible or mean or they want to be evil.
But you have to have a complete new idea so that you can compete in the market. That's very much it.
And Silicon Valley really wants you to be very well connected into the region. And they want you to go to Stanford, and they want you to, have the pedigree and that sort of stuff. And that bugs me. And so when companies actually come here, they have to have kind of this overwhelming, innovation where they're actually truly changing things.
I see.
And so and that's my problem. You have to be able to promise in Silicon Valley VC that you're going to grow into $1 billion company. And they have to be able to believe you.
Absolutely.
And so if you're solving a local problem that's massive in North Africa or MENA, the VCs in Silicon Valley don't understand those problems, and chances are they're not going to invest. And so why we're doing our fund and structuring it the way we are is so that we can invest locally in local problems. What we need is we need a company to be growing revenue 30, 50, 100% year over year. And they need to be able to grow, and we need to be able to help them grow for the next 5, 10 years. And so if I'm a lone entrepreneur and I'm struggling, you're probably not the best.
Not the best opportunity, of course. But how about the other way around?
Silicon Valley doesn't have magic Silicon Valley does that turns companies into unicorns. What Silicon Valley is good for is fundraising sometimes is business connections, and it's very expensive to actually move here. So you probably need to be able to have at least $10,000 a month per person to come here. It's probably going to take you 6 to 12 months to raise a significant funding round, and build that network and build that trust with the investors to be able to do that.
That's not practical at all. I mean, yeah, for the people who are coming from this region, it's not practical.
And so how do you come up with $250,000 to move to another country to raise money? Like,
it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Yeah, but how about the other way around? Like, how about like very wealthy family from the Gulf area, from the northern region, and they want to invest their money into startup in Silicon Valley? Do you support in that?
And so we do in our fund, absolutely. We do have to be careful, again, because of the United States racism, and so the anti-money laundering and KYC and all of that sort of crap that has to go through in the United States to be able to receive money. But we've been quite active, and we'll take investors, and we will be publicly traded on the London Stock Exchange. So if people can invest in a stock in the London Stock Exchange, they can invest in our fund, and they will be able to invest in Silicon Valley companies and companies in our global network. Yeah. Other ways is if families are interested in investing in specific funds, then how do you actually build a relationship with those funds and a relationship with those fund managers, and, you know, talk to them, find out, hey, is this a good fund? Is this a good fund manager? Do I like what they're doing? And then can I go ahead and invest them? I
just heard a new term yesterday. It's called, if I'm not mistaken, family office or family ventures, something like that. It's like the very wealthy families who are interested in investing in companies. They do have the money, and I had a chance before to work with an investor from the Gulf area. He was taking money from the very wealthy family, and I was talking to them. It's like some people were on the phone with me, and they saying, I want to invest $10 million, I want to invest $5 million in a company in the US, specifically in Silicon Valley. So it was a new term, and I feel like the other way around could be as well an opportunity if someone is hopefully listening to that. But maybe I'm curious to know what kind of characteristics or personalities do you love to work with, and whether someone is coming to launch a company in Silicon Valley or whether someone want to be a chapter representative.
And so one of the characteristics that I look for personally,
yes,
is, do people actually have an immense capacity to tolerate pain and suffering? Like grit and determination.
Why are you saying that? Yeah.
Because being an entrepreneur is very painful, and it's very miserable. And there's a lot of roadblocks. Like, people tell you no all the time.
Sure.
I had a good friend 2 weeks ago tell me that I was crazy for wanting to take a venture fund to IPO and innovate on it. And so you have to be able to have a thick skin and deal with that. And so grit and determination, I think, would be the nice way of putting that. My way, if I'm just talking with a friend, is you just have to be able to have a really thick skin and an immense capacity for suffering.
Sure.
Because there's great parts about being an entrepreneur, and everybody talks about, oh, you know, Mark Zuckerberg, he's a billionaire. Wouldn't it be great to be Mark Zuckerberg? Well, okay, fine, but his parents were rich, and he was able to drop out of Harvard to start a company. Like, if I didn't have rich parents and I couldn't get to Harvard, so I can't drop out, how do I do this? Well, I have to suffer and work in blood and sweat and tears to get to this point. And then after 10 years, I'll be an overnight success. Yay!
It's not easy.
And so what I look for gritty entrepreneurs. I look for people who are curious and are insane about learning. I also look for, on the investment side, if you take a nerd who wants to optimize whatever they're building for money points, I really stop worrying about that entrepreneur. for instance, if I'm building something because this is going to be a great new technology, but I don't have any customers and I've imagined all these customers, I worry about that entrepreneur a lot. Imaginary customers kill companies all the time. I've had many imaginary customers. Once you actually start building something for somebody else who will pay you for it and give you money for it, and as an entrepreneur, I start to think, how do I optimize for this money coming into my company, and how do I innovate to get more money into my company? At that point, I stop worrying about that entrepreneur because I know that they will eventually, over the next 10 to 20 years, be successful. Like, they will win the money points game in 20 years if they have enough pain tolerance and threshold. So those are things that I look for. In our, selection process, it's, do entrepreneurs review and score you well on kind of our selection criteria? Do investors think you're going to be able to hit revenue? And can we help? Like, that's our selection process for our fund. People that I like talking to, just like hanging out, are people that are passionate about helping others, people that are curious and want to learn.
How about language and culture barriers?
Say that again?
How about languages and culture barriers?
I don't really care what languages you actually speak. I speak Spanish, English. I know about 3 or 4 words of Arabic. I would love to learn more. Cultural values. I tend to prefer people who aren't elitist in terms of, that are more egalitarian, because that's my personal background.
How about open-minded people, like not dogmatic, like anything in that area?
I tend to, people who aren't willing to learn are hard for me to actually interact with. I like people who are willing to learn and who are willing to be coached. That's not to say that people who are uncoachable, who are like, I'm going to do this and this and this, can't be successful entrepreneurs. It's just hard for me to engage with them.
Sure. And then if someone, like, you're saying that the application is not available at this moment, like, when will be the application available again?
So we're actually building the 4th generation of software for that. I can't put a hard date on it. I mean, it'll be done when it's done. We're going to have like a community demo day where our entrepreneurs will review and score each other, and they will actually present. That will be available hopefully in the next 3 to 6 months. Once we IPO, then we'll actually start taking on new companies and kind of start this process seriously. And sort of doing that. I'm hoping spring. That being said, that's dependent on Brexit and coronavirus.
I see. Yeah, absolutely. I can tell. And then if someone is interested in maybe talking to you, sharing their ideas, like, what is the best way? Like LinkedIn, if you want to share a website, email.
Yeah, I'm pretty responsive on LinkedIn. My time is relatively limited just because I really have to get this fund off the ground, and so I'm really focusing on fundraising and the IPO process. There's a handful of programs where I'm mentoring for our team. Tends to actually be a bit more engaged, and they have a bit more time. And so if they're interested in talking with the startups, I can, if the startup is interested in talking with someone on the team, I'm happy to do that. But the best way to reach out to me is probably on LinkedIn, and I'm usually really, if you're not selling me engineering services or selling me SEO services, I'm usually pretty responsive on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I can tell from my experience, like messaging you on LinkedIn, you've been very responding, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, of course, Mostafa. Very cool, man. Can I ask you a couple questions?
Yeah, you can ask me, definitely, yes.
In 5 years, you are very successful. How do you define that success?
Oh, my success is turning what I'm doing right now into a TV channel where everyone in the entire world can watch it and can participate it. That's for me a success. So I'm using the minimum tool that I have for now, and I want it to be big in the future. So in 5 years, probably you're gonna see it on TV in Silicon Valley.
Nice. So you want to do interviews? You want to do
Live,
interviews like this, but on
live,
TV,
like face to
streaming
face
live.
with big B entrepreneurs.
Very cool. What's your biggest pain in the ass?
Usually the cultural obstacles and the challenges in economically when I'm facing in Cairo, Egypt, like because the region is not the ecosystem, the entrepreneurship ecosystem is not yet flourished or well established. I would say there are a lot you have to do and work around it. It's not easy. I've been in Silicon. I'm sorry. I've been in Palo Alto and Stanford University. I've met entrepreneurs, and the challenges they are facing is completely different than what I've seen. What I'm seeing here, it's completely different. All right, and different in terms of infrastructure is not always available. In terms of technology, the latest technology is not always available. Um, and um, and even if it's available, it's very expensive because it's coming from, I would say, the West. Could be U.S., could be Canada, could be Europe, whatever. So these are the challenges which I'm facing. Maybe the positive thing when you work in a region which doesn't have much of entrepreneurship ecosystem going on is that it's a blue ocean type of region. So you can start any whatever project, and then you can easily spread out because it's not existed before. You see what I mean?
Yeah. If you had a magic wand, what are 2 or 3 things that you would change about the startup ecosystem in Cairo and North Africa?
First of all, how easy I can establish a company. I know friends in Sweden can start a company in 24 hours and it could be done online. Why we don't have the same thing? Why I don't have to wait for month and month just to get the papers? Um, and then number two is getting payment online. We don't have that infrastructure yet. It's complicated.
Wow.
Yeah, to get payment online. It's not. It's not easy as I have to use a third party like Strip, and it's not even allowed. Okay, so that's number two. Yep.
Wow.
And number three, I would say um, if there is a community where it can tell me if I wanna start an Uber, where to go, how to start, like who to speak to, like if I wanna run a software like Zoom, for example, like who to go to build it and how to put it online and how to market it, like these little things um, make sense to me, and then would definitely change the way I look at the ecosystem if they are existed.
Hmm. Interesting. And so, kind of on the, it sounds like just the mechanics of actually starting a company and being able to receive online payments is a huge hurdle in Egypt.
Yeah, I have to go all the way around. So they have to receive payment on Pioneer, which is an American company. It's a middleman, and they have to take the money back from Pioneer again to me. So it's just complicated.
Yeah, we in our work in Latin America, we see the exact same problem. Like if I'm a startup in Colombia, there isn't an API that I can actually use to take payments online in Colombia that would also allow me to take payments from Peru, which is the next largest market close to me, or Chile, or Argentina, or Mexico. And so even though culturally people across Latin America are very similar, even though you could market in Spanish, it's how do you create that company in Colombia? How do you get a bank account in Colombia? How do you actually take online payments? And then it's really hard. I see similar and I hear similar problems all the time about the MENA region.
Sure.
And so if I had a magic wand, we would actually take the portfolio company that we have in Chile Lexco, that it's helping companies do those automatic incorporations across the region online in hopefully 4 to 6 weeks instead of months. And then eventually build a partnership where there's with a payments provider, or invest in a company that's a payments provider that essentially creates a unified API to do payments all across Latin America. The third step that I would see is then how do you actually do HR and follow HR, and how do I hire in 5 different countries and pay taxes in 5 different countries and comply with all those laws? Like, that's a third layer of API that you actually need. Once I have incorporation, payments, and HR, now I have,
very much everything. Sure.
And now I can start, building a company that speaks Arabic, that markets in Arabic, that has the culturally similar language, but can operate across, the 15 to 20 companies, 50 to 20 countries in the MENA region, and just build a company instead of having to work with all these tiny little mechanical details.
You know what? The thing that I thought about was why I should just start a company here instead of just maybe going to Sweden or going to Norway, or maybe Slovenia, because I've been in Slovenia. I know starting a company there is not a big deal. I can start a company in Europe, and the best thing about Europe, it's all united. Like, it's not that much of complicated stuff going on. You know what I mean? It's easy to transfer money, and it's free to transfer money from a European country to another, and it's easy to grow. I mean, they don't have that kind of shitty obstacles and challenges that we're going through. So, and I've seen seminar services, people inviting entrepreneurs from the MENA region, Asia region. They invited them to Europe, specifically to Sweden, Norway, Scandinavian countries, I would say, Ireland, and they are offering consultancy how to start a company with 500 euros or something. And then you start a company, they're giving you all the paper, you have your bank account, you have an official document. And the most important thing is, after working for like 3-5 years, you're gonna get the nationality and you're gonna get the passport. And for me, it's very nice, not bad.
Yeah, and so no, I completely understand, and I completely agree. What I love about entrepreneurs in emerging markets is if you can actually make something work in Egypt or Nigeria or Tunisia or Lebanon, chances are you have the grit and determination to make it work in like Europe or the United States, when a lot of those stupid obstacles are just kind of gone.
Sure.
And so that's one of the reasons why I tend to gravitate towards these markets, and why I tend to kind of sync or jive with entrepreneurs in these markets better, is just because I can relate.
Awesome.
And so the disadvantages that an entrepreneur has in Cairo or North Africa are that you have immense amounts of pain and suffering to actually just do an online business. Like those problems that you just mentioned are huge obstacles to surmount. The superpowers that gives you, if you could do that, however, is you have very little competition, and like you said, it's a blue ocean.
It's a blue ocean market, yes.
You have no competition once you can actually do that. And so it's a double-edged sword. My last question is, how can I help?
Yeah, how you can help is, I'm already connected with an ecosystem here. Somehow it's not that very strong, but it's good. And I know many active people in the community, in that community specifically, they always looking to bring foreigner brands into the local so that they can get the best out of it. All you mentioned in the beginning was amazing, and that's why I keep asking you how they can apply, like what is the business model, like where to go, like who to ask, like I mean, how the people can communicate to you, because I know once I post that online, people are gonna come ask me. I want to speak to him. I wanna have a branch, for instance. If someone comes to me and say I want to have a branch in Cairo region, what should I tell them?
And so I would put you in touch with Melissa, who actually runs our global community, and she can kind of take and run it and help people. And we have now a package of, branding and marketing materials that you can actually use. And these are kind of rules and guidelines and that sort of stuff. And so we're formalizing that process. And so I'm more than happy to put you in touch with Melissa.
Exactly, that's
and
what I
think
want.
That she would be very excited to actually learn about, because we've both been saying, how do we actually do more work in Africa?
Absolutely. And then one more thing, I know lots of people who will be interested in discussing, and they are in a position where they can discuss moving to Silicon Valley. I know they are big, they have the money, they probably not looking for investments, but they're looking for exposure. They want to go to Silicon Valley. Moving to Silicon Valley, it's completely different story for them. It takes the business to another level.
No, absolutely. That's been a core part of our business. And so if you come across someone like that you think might be a fit, feel free to send it to me in an email or a blurb, or I can send you my WhatsApp and say, hey,
yes,
Jonnathan,
please.
would you be interested in talking to this company, or someone on your team be interested in talking to this company?
Yes,
and we can go back and forth like that.
Yes.
Full disclosure, once I can take this fund to IPO, that's going to give us some jet fuel to really be able to say, hey, not only can we help you move to Silicon Valley,
yes,
here's how you get your visa, here's how you get your bank account, here's where you should actually live, here's how this and that and the other thing, and here's a check. And so it either stay in Cairo, stay in, Tunisia, stay in Morocco, or come here, but how can we actually help you build your company and grow your company and help you get to your dreams?
That's awesome.
And so hold my beer. Give me 9 months.
Yeah, we need to keep in touch. We need to keep the communication on.
Yeah. Another thing that would be interesting to me is there was a big hackathon a couple months ago called EU versus the virus, and they did a 25,000 person hackathon. I don't know if you ended up hearing about it. It was kind of a big deal. There was 2 people who ended up running a daily live stream, and it was a daily video show of kind of what was happening on the EU versus the virus. They did interviews and that sort of stuff. Their dream is to actually start a television show that actually talks about the latest and the greatest about startups.
Wow.
Would you be interested in talking to them about maybe being the MENA correspondent?
Yes, please.
Cool. Let me warm up a conversation with them. Send me an email saying, Jonnathan, I'm Mostafa, I'm a journalist, I'm in this region, I'm very interested in producing video content that actually, that talks about the MENA region, or, very interested in doing this. You mentioned that you knew some journalists in Norway that were interested in doing the same. I'd love to talk with them.
Awesome. I'll definitely do this.
And then let me send you my cell phone number.
Yes, please. You can send that by email if you want to.
I dropped it in chat. If you want to copy and paste it, and I'll send it in email as well. And the best way to get in touch with me is actually WhatsApp. Sometimes, I process 200 emails a day, and so sometimes those get buried.
Much.
But if you send me a WhatsApp, if you have a question, by all means, let me know. And then if you also want to talk with Melissa on our community team,
yes, please.
Say, Jonnathan, can you introduce me to someone on the community team, and then we can take it from there and go.
All right, community team. All right, I will do this right away.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate the time. I was very lovely, and I really appreciate all the support, and it's a very great opportunity to speak to you. It's my honor, and I hope we keep in touch, please.
Absolutely, Mostafa. And if this gets published, just let me know where, and I can share it on.
Absolutely.
I'll share it on LinkedIn.
I'm going to edit it. I'm going to send it over to you, and then
Awesome. And I really do want to help support. So Laura is my partner and my wife. Her bucket list is to go to Egypt. And she's told me repeatedly, I will let you go to the Middle East, but if you go to Egypt without me, I will kill you.
She has a home here. She can come anytime.
Thank you, sir.
She has
Awesome.
a home here.
So bucket list after coronavirus is done. I would love to take you out for chai once we actually get to Egypt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My pleasure.
Awesome, Mustafa.
Have a lovely day.
Thank you so much, my friend.
You too. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.